anything that would increase the population of birds around an airport. There's also a entity at U.S. Fish and Wildlife that has sort of the opposite desire, that really increase bird populations, but perhaps not near an airport. So that's a thing we're going to need to go more into. And it really is an issue with anything. They have a concern. Anytime we're going to open up the waste, they said that you're going to attract birds. And this is an aviation hazard. Don't really feel good about any of these things without more discussion about this. So there's more to do there, more work to do there. Now, Nathan, they were talking about the island building project. And so I saw a picture of Great Island, all these new birds there. It's a wonderful thing. And they said, no, it's not a wonderful thing. It's at the airport. So that is a valid perspective as well. And then we also had a conversation with Prairie Island Indian community. The conversation was mostly bringing them up to speed on the project, giving opportunity for feedback. They took the information that we have and are going to get back to us with comment. I don't know, Pam, do you have anything more to add from that conversation?
Yeah, I think I would just follow up with, I've reached out to both on the Mille Lacs band, which indicated Ramsey County as a county of interest, and have not heard back from them. And then Prairie Island did take us up on the offer for a conversation. We are going to be sharing all of the analytical data with them and some GIS so that they can play with it, see what's there, and kind of left the conversation open with what way, if any, are they interested in engaging? Are they interested in formal consultation or conversations here just at the staff level? So it was a good conversation. Their environmental director, I believe, and then 2 of the water staff participated in the conversation. So we spoke for about an hour and left it with information sharing as the next step for us.
All right, let's keep going. Property boundaries. This is a map of our understanding of current property boundaries. With the brown area being MCES property. The 2 different shades of green are Battle Creek Regional Park, the darker shade, and the lighter, more olive color is Big Side Park. The dump, of course, is in the middle there, Battle Creek running right through it. We also have Canadian Pacific Railway property. So at one point, the waste did extend onto the CP Rail property. They did a brownfield project. They moved all that waste off their property and shrunk you could say this was the beginning of a dig and haul in a very small way. They did that to get themselves off the dump. Any questions about any of this? And this is meeting the need people had last time.
I don't have any questions. I like the key on the side as a colorblind person. Adding numbers to those would be helpful, but thank you. Just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you.
What is the average inflow of waters coming down from Battle Creek? Is that pretty significant, or is it very, according, of course, to rainfalls, up water?
Yeah, I've been there when it was very, very little. When we did the dump removal project, we were able to dam it up and easily pump it around with not a very large pump. I was out there last summer. We couldn't walk across the bridge because it was flooded. So yeah, I think it's quite variable.
So that would impact, I would imagine, times when you can be working on the site. Okay.
Yeah, one of the construction challenges. I mentioned Narayan will talk about that when he talks about construction on the property.
It's not only the Mississippi River water, it's that Battle Creek water.
Creek as well.
Impacting the site.
Okay. Yes. All right, let's move on to talk about a little bit about waste sorting. This is waste sorting, one kind of waste sorting at one end of the sorting spectrum. I say this is standard procedure at an environmental excavation. You see a hazardous waste. Well, you see a large piece of metal that it's not going to go to the place you're disposing of the thing you're disposing. Grab it with the excavator, set it aside. standard procedure. You encounter a hazardous waste, particularly something that's already containerized. That's an all stop, reassess, sort that out. This is one kind of waste sorting. Large metal, enough large to be picked with an excavator, and identifiable hazardous materials. That's the sort of the target of the sorting. Big stuff that can easily go someplace else, and there's a good someplace else for it. This is one end of the spectrum. This is also waste sorting, this other end of the spectrum. We've got two what we call material recovery facilities. On the right, this is single source recycling, relatively clean in-feed, higher recovery rate. Research we're getting is like 89% recovery rate. On the other side is what's called a dirty materials recovery facility. The whole MSW waste stream is going, and they have certain targets. People are picking out certain targets for the sorting. It's a different kind of sorting, and there are things in the middle. So, and this is what we would be sorting. So we'd be sorting. It's 50-year-old waste. It's wet. The organics are gone. The organics have degraded. This is what the sorting material. So we did research into this. Waste sorting is done of landfill material. Looks like we weren't finding cases where it seemed to be they were doing it for economic reasons. It really was cases they have other reasons, other motivations. One of them was reducing the size. That was one. Yeah. We were hoping to present a whole lot of information today about cost and dollars and tons and case studies. Where we're landing actually is this. Next slide. So we've got really more questions than answers right now with the waste sorting. It gets complicated. These are I think the four big questions, and we may actually need one more research and maybe even some pilot studies to figure this out. What would the percent recovery look like on this? It seems like the dirtier the in-feed, the lower the recovery rate, and it seems to drop off quite dramatically with how contaminated the in-feed is. Could this waste be sorted? Yes. We have the technology, might be a multi-step process, including cost. It could, we could separate out the component pieces. Then what would happen? Is there a market for any of the component pieces? And that's really the thing to figure out. Would the sorting get it out of a waste stream? Would people be interested in the degraded organic material with whatever contaminants are in it? What about the 50-year-old items, the metal perhaps? Like, what would the recovery rate actually be if we went through all the sorting? Would any of it be kept out of the waste stream? Big question marks there. What would it cost? And how much time would this add to the process, which is related to how much would it cost? Yeah. We weren't finding great examples where this is done economically or on massively large scales for old waste like this.
I know this would fall in the what would the sorting cost, but if we're going to lay these out, I'd want to more highlight worker protection because we know there's asbestos in there. We also know there's other hazards in there. And, you can sort out the drums that might be hazardous waste, but you can't sort out the stuff that's intermixed, the hazards that are intermixed. You can't really often even identify them, but they are there. And so I know that is part of that line item, but if we were going to really go down that, I'd want to call that out as a separate line item, worker protection and just protection for the people around the area too. Asbestos there'll be friable asbestos in there. I know there will be. And sorting can stir that all up and send it flying.
The worker health and safety piece.
Yeah.
We're thinking also about the end user piece. It's like, okay, we'll take this material. Can you guarantee this doesn't contain any? We can't guarantee that. How will that affect the market, this material?
Compost sites are going to want that organics. I can promise you that.
They will or they won't?
They will not.
They will not. Say more about that.
Say, well, because if you're going to compost the organics and there are any that are still viable after 50 years, which is going to be pretty low, compost sites only want clean waste streams. Like they don't really even like compostables, servingware. that slows the process down. They certainly don't want stuff that might have asbestos in it, might have lead in it, might have who knows what. We can't ensure that that's not in there. But it would be risky to go down that road. I don't know who would take it.
Do you have an idea of what you are gonna try to recover? Just metals? Is that what we're looking for, to recover metals?
What is the
Organics.
target? I think that's the question. What's the target? We don't, yeah. But I think we're back to what's the target? The standard procedure, we're going after the big metal chunk. That's easy. Yeah, for sure. We're doing that. We do that every time. That can be done.
I've seen where it's sometimes the cost of recovery ends up being more than what you're gonna, to recover. The occupational exposure, the risk going down there and being in that stuff, sure pick off what you can, but that stuff's been there 50, 60 years. Anything that's rusted off probably is rusted off with the amount of water and the environment that it's in. So I don't know if there's really anything to recover.
Hans,
Yeah.
I have a question regarding the site itself and the MPCA's ability to know where things are buried already. Has that been assessed in what you're talking about?
How much certainty do we have about the waste footprint? That's what you're asking.
Right, and what's buried where? Do you know that there's chemicals over here, but there are some metals over there? I would assume that they would have limited idea of that, but perhaps there is a map of zones that time frames were buried in, and that might answer the question if there's anything there worth recovering.
Yeah. We don't have that. What we know is, like, from what obviously we could see cracked batteries, we could see drums of hazardous waste. We've done some test trenching operations looking for other those things. We didn't find any there. Yeah, there's not a detailed map of where all the different, and if there are different kinds of waste, it's all pretty homogeneous. That we don't know.
I believe that this was an open dumping site, correct? And people would come down and dump stuff, but there were also scavengers down there. So I'm thinking a lot of any easily recyclable stuff might have been picked up already and recycled by people that were looking to make an extra buck on the weekends. Is that possible?
Don't know for sure. It does seem possible.
1970, sure. Sure.
Yeah. So I don't imagine a big collection of copper pipe is laying in there where it's probably been already picked out.
Unless it was wrapped in asbestos. Which is what we found when we were doing some of the excavation, piping wrapped in asbestos.
Dumping asbestos.
Or piping wrapped in asbestos.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, is there more on waste sorting? This is a great discussion.
Well, we spoke about the asbestos being put into the atmosphere friable, but also there's volatile organic compounds too, correct? Would there still be any of that, or is that already leached out of this site? What is the thought of the FACA on that? Because those would be almost impossible to control.
It was well contained.
What we found with VOCs is there were a lot of VOCs in the drum removal, the 230 drums. It was mostly VOCs, but those were in a container. The contaminant data, we've seen generally a decrease in VOCs over time. That was an earlier era of the pig. This is before we were looking for PFAS, before we're looking for 1,4-dioxane. Those are the two things that we're most concerned about today, the PFAS, 1,4-dioxane. There's also metals, there's also some residual VOCs, there's also some other things. Okay. And the contamination that we're concerned about varies depending if we're talking about sediments in Pig's Eye Lake or groundwater or waste itself. Great, yeah.
You mentioned, the question is, have you done any characterization of the waste? I mean, we have that, have there been like test pits dug to kind of characterize what the waste is, composition?
Yeah. I wish we had more at this point. What we have done is mostly visual characterization. We've dug pits and see what we found. When we did the cleanup work, the early cleanup work, that's also visual, but don't have a whole lot beyond that at this point.
Hans Narayan here, sorry.
Yeah.
So we just finished, I don't have the results yet, but we just, in the last 2 weeks, finished the soil sampling to characterize what contaminants could be there in the waste. So the results should be coming in the next few weeks, but so that hopefully should have that information for the next task force meeting.
That would be different than what you would think of as a traditional waste comp sort, which you know how much plastics or metals or other organic materials. I mean, I think that the difficulty here is so much of that is dirt that compared to what's coming into any of our traditional sorting facilities. And that will be the largest task, is separating the dirt from everything to even get it into the ability for a dirty MRF. So for instance, like Polk County does, Ramsey Washington does a number of levels of sorting. This would have to be cleaned up quite a bit to go to any of those facilities. You can see the construction material there. That is an issue. I know talking to Polk County, for instance, something they really have concerns about is construction debris going through their systems and just what a havoc it can create to their automation and conveyors.
Even a dirty MRF is not taking it out of a landfill. And waste sorts are not out of a landfill. It's always before it's been landfilled. So this is many steps past what a dirty MRF has ever managed before. That's why you're not finding any examples. Because anybody who even runs a dirty MRF would look at this and go, no, they ain't coming into my place. Like Kirk said, it's dirt, not dirty.
I think one of the questions we have for the task force is a lot of research can go into these questions. The question is, does the task force want us to spend that time on it? There are the proposals where folks have mined landfills, and that example is, for instance, in Olmsted, but they're feeding a waste energy facility with it, not a MRF to pull out the recyclables. So we could do a very high level review to see if there's some more maybe case studies, or if we just targeted, say, metals, which is going to be the most likely thing. You run a magnet through it, maybe you could do more than the big eye test. But to really sort through it, what is the appetite for the task force to know about that? That'll just make sure that we right size the research and investigation that we come back to this group with.
I have a question to that. So Olmsted County, how old was that waste? And do we know, did they know what was there?
Yeah. So it's
We
their
don't here.
old NSW landfill that they sometimes pull from that we can get some more information, but it is just going straight into the waste energy facility is my understanding. But I don't know how they're storing it because you wouldn't want the dirt in the.
I would suspect it's not as old as what we're talking about here, but also just the materials that would have been sent there. So it's a landfill, but I don't know how it would be. I guess more information would be helpful, but I can't imagine that it would be comparable other than they were both landfills.
It's certainly not going to be as wet.
Right.
That's
Right.
That's one of the biggest differences with this one with other little more modern landfills is they're constructed to stay dry. Where this was potentially dumped in the water, right? I mean, so my personal thought is that anything past doing the obvious, grab the car hulks and the big stuff, is probably a waste of the MPCA's time to study. It's all going to look like that. Maybe when you hit the stuff that has the ash from your facility, it's going to be grayer, but it's going to look like that. And the risk reward, I can't see it. You're just not going to get, because like Bill said, it was difficult. that there were scavengers at these places prior to the rules disallowing them. And even now, the C&D landfills in Dakota County still scavenge, but they do it themselves, right? And they have contractors on site pulling the metal out that has value. So we should do that. Obviously, you're going to do that. You're going to look for hazards, big stuff, the drums, things, the broken batteries. Anything short of that, I mean, anything more than that, I should say, I think is just literally a waste of time. It'll add years to this project, I guarantee, and with very little benefit, maybe none.
I support that train of thought, as that task member Magnuson has stated.
Thank you.
Sounds like we'll look at the homestead, see if there's enough there, and then we can make the decision based on that. And then sounds like a little interest in metal, a little bit more information on metal, what typical or maybe a little bit beyond that, and kind of leave it at that. I've seen a number of heads nodding.
I would agree with that too.
Okay.
Right. Let's keep going. Next on the agenda is team from Clean Harbors to talk about moving waste.
Some of you have the literature we brought. There's some more, so thank you all for giving us a chance to talk to you today. This is quite a large task you've all been given. This is nothing really new for us, so I thought we should come and talk to you about our experience with it and give you our feedback on your project. Yeah, you bet. Diane Ruddle with Clean Harbors. I've been here for, I think about 17 years in different roles with Clean Harbors, from operations to now I'm the PFAS leader for the Midwest, West, and Western Canada. I'm here with Joey Maloney, who's our project services representative for the region as well. Project services for Clean Harbors just means big and complicated. So that's why he's here. So I'll give you a little overview. Some of you may be familiar with Clean Harbors, some of you aren't. Clean Harbors is a fairly large company. We have 100 waste management facilities throughout the country, including incineration units, hazardous waste and non-hazardous waste landfill sites, wastewater treatment. We're also recognized as one of the global most sustainable corporations. So I think that's something to celebrate when you're talking about a hazardous waste company. We also have a total PFAS solution incorporating remediation strategies, disposal, and we do a lot of AFFF transition and management work. So high level Clean Harbors. It's aqueous film forming foam. It's what you shoot at fires to put them out. Oh, it's highly contaminated with PFAS. Good stuff is. We touched on some waste sorting just a little bit ago. Waste determination is really going to be key for this project. The land disposal restrictions were put in place with RCRA. RCRA is federal regulations saying what you can do with certain types of waste. That's going to tell you, you have some material in your landfill for Pig's Eye, what levels of it can be landfilled, and it can go to a non-haz landfill, or if it needs to go to a hazardous waste landfill. And then also if there's something that needs to be done with it before it can be landfilled to keep it from contaminating the water and the surrounding spaces. You do have very limited information on what is in that space. Hopefully Nariana's lab will give us some more clues on what that means. From a Clean Harbors and from an excavation standpoint, typically with projects like this, waste sorting is more of a grid system of lab. And then you look at your space and you say, wow, this part is really bad. Okay, this part's not so bad. And you can then move from everything goes to the same place to we have to handle this part differently than this part. And then that's kind of where a lot of the cost savings comes from when you talk about a large space like this in a waste sort type of a conversation. You're going to find a lot of buried treasures. You know, you've got
drums. You're gonna find some interesting cylinders that nobody knows what they are. You have to figure that out before you decide where they're gonna go. Areas of hazardous waste, I don't think it's too out of the realm to think that you're gonna find some spaces that really should go somewhere permanently and not stay where they are. Non-hazardous materials, there's probably gonna be some areas like that. And then hazardous landfill materials. So the spectrum. Just talk to you a little bit about our landfill network. We have some of our hazardous waste landfills listed there. Most of them have really good rail service. That's going to be key for this project. Every landfill and every facility in general has different permit requirements as far as what they can take, how fast they can take it. And then that's going to be a key part to this project as well as where it's going to go, how fast they can move it. We do have a large disposal network for all different types of concentrations of waste. So that's going to be also key. And we've got, like I said, a lot of years of experience managing large projects. I think we're on our 45th year of operation today. So kind of impressive for hazardous waste companies. Thermal treatment options. We have 66% of the capacity in the country for commercial hazardous waste incineration. They're spread out throughout the country. They're not on every corner. So they're not around the corner everywhere you go. It's a different niche market. Just thought it would be interesting to see the spectrum there. We know that there was some talk about barge transportation. Being that it's on the river, that's natural, thinking that that would be a good way to go. We took a look at it. We had some internal discussions, and for this project, we really don't feel like it's going to be your best fit. And there's a couple reasons for that. When you have to fill up that barge area, it's a big space, and you have to do it fast. So you'd have to have all that material ready to go, right when that ship's ready to, and then you have to get it there, get it loaded real fast because they charge you a lot if you take any sort of time for it. So you're paying for the slip fee, you're paying for the demurrage for the crew, fuel. They hit you pretty hard. Now, when you're talking about waste too, that compounds it because you don't want to put the waste directly in that barge. It's not like shipping corn or something like that. You have then contamination that you need to deal with, decontamination, cleaning at the end. Those fees really expound fast. So for quite a few of those reasons, we would say that that's really not going to be your best bet. In the past, when we've barged waste like this, there's a facility that can barge right out of it, and it's going right to a facility that can barge as well. So when you have two transportation legs to deal with as well at the beginning and the end, once you get it down the river, you eat up a lot of your savings. And you can see the bags there. That's pretty much the most efficient way to transport waste in a barge because you can control the amount of spillover and contamination of the barge itself. If you're putting clean corn in it, you don't want to say there was hazardous waste in it right before. So that's a little bit about barging. Railroad is really where we think you're going to find your sweet spot in this scenario. We own a lot of our assets, so the savings for the $95 to $125 a ton, that's just a general average for projects. Every location is different. Every distance it has to travel is different. The longer it has to travel, the greater your savings is when you go for rail versus rubber. Railroads, like you touched on, are not a service-oriented companies. You have to really know what you're talking about when you're working with them. You have to basically do all the pieces and then just call them when it's ready. And then they route it through their network to get to the end facility. And you give up a lot of your power when you ship via rail because you can't say definitively it's going to be there on Tuesday because it goes their schedule and it goes through their network and then it gets there when it gets there. So when you have a facility that's expecting your load on Tuesday, they have to be flexible enough that they might get it on Thursday or Friday. And then they have to have the personnel there to deal with that. So it's kind of a coordination piece of it. We are very used to it. We ship largest shipper of hazardous waste by rail in North America. So we do over 10,000 rail shipments a year through our network, just facility to facility and then straight in as well, depending on which sites that we're looking at. So, and like I said, we do have a very large fleet of our own materials, which helps us control some of those cost savings. So a little bit of how it works, because it is kind of an enigma here. You have to make an agreement with the railroad loading area near your project, like you said. Railroad yards are typically not the place where they let you do anything, because they have their own systems, they have their own liability, they have their own insurance. They don't want to deal with you. They want you to find a transload facility. Normally we build a ramp, like you can see there, and then use end dumps, line to end dumps to dump into lined rail cars. So that's typically the rail process that we use. Each rail car has to stand its legal weight. So that's 2,800,000 pounds. So it's decently heavy. You can move a lot of material at a time. Once it gets to a full capacity, close the liner, and then you still have to put your proper DOT markings on for the railroad. Shipping the manifest, that's completed and signed. And then the rail car release is filled out with the railroad, letting them know we have a car, it's here, it's ready to go, and this is where it needs to go to. And then from there, it travels through their network in transit. Once it gets to the facility, the cars are dug out with an excavator, and then the material is placed back into an end dump to get put to its proper location, either at a landfill or to the incineration feed lines, wherever its destination is once it gets to the facility. Does anybody have any questions about rail process in general? I know that was a very, high level view of it, but I wanted to give you a little bit of idea on the scope. Yes.
286,000 gross, what's kind of the net roughly?
I think they said that they weigh about 50,000 pounds a piece, the cars. Yeah, I can definitely find that out.
Just roughly. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. So considering your vehicle, over the road, if you're going rubber, that has to be 80,000 pounds, gross. So you're looking at usually somewhere in that 50 to 60,000 pound net by one load versus that. So gives you an idea on the economy of scale, why rail was really going to be a good option for moving this material. In terms of case studies, that tends to be a nice way to kind of frame past projects and current projects. There are a couple abstracts in those binders that the recent projects that we've done. WDE was one that was done in Minnesota fairly recently. So it was an industrial pit that was a closed landfill. We built that structure around the excavation area to control smell and deposition into the atmosphere. And in there's a picture, I think, inside the building of the excavation as well. So we did the install and construction of the temporary building, removal of 397 intact and partially intact drums, overpacking and analyzing, as we talked about. When you pull out those drums, you have to deal with them one by one. And then 3,000 debris drums to our Lone Mountain facility in Oklahoma. We excavated and sampled 13,000 tons of Rickerkin contaminated soils. So that's hazardous waste soils. And that went to facilities, and those are incinerators in Aragonite, Utah, and Kimball, Nebraska. And then there was also 7,100 tons that were able to go to a Subtitle D landfill. So Subtitle D, that's a non-haz landfill, if you're not speaking RCRA. We did backfill that excavation, and so manage vapor controls and media throughout the structure. So beyond that, when you're shipping loads, you can use it's a foam product that helps control some of the vapor and odor issues. So that's also another option for odor control, because obviously that's a concern. So it's just a general slide about Clean Harbors. This is one of our remediation sites in Hawaii. They just, gave us a nice little rainbow for that photo, so we wanted to use it here. 12 billion gallons of PFAS water treated. That's just a stat for us. 200,000 tons of PFAS soil removed so far. 95 treatment systems installed and operating, and 95 large remediation projects on the books. So, everybody's definition of large is different. Ours is fairly large. So that's just contact information. And I believe all these slides are going to be available for everybody. Yeah, so that's really all we had prepared. I know didn't want to take up, we have 15 minutes. So, if you have any questions, we're here. If it's not today, my contact information is in the slide, or in the books there. Just let us know. Like, this is a big ask. I'm a Minnesotan, so this is my tax dollars too. So I have a vested interest here.
Questions?
Who is that speaking?
Diane Reynolds from Clean Harbors.
Thank you, Diane. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
I'll just note the WDE example was about a third of an acre of a known hazardous waste dump. So there are some differences there in terms of scale. That building is only covering a third of an acre, and we knew hazardous waste there. And the project was solely to deal with the hazardous waste. The rest of the landfill remained in where.
That had a asphalt liner to it, right?
I believe so, and it had some slurry walls on the side that were thought to, back in the day, thought it would contain. It had not. It had gone for the release.
Yeah, every project's very different,
Are there any projects that you've done that are comparable to what we have here? Because a lot of the drums and things were taken out before. It just seems like it's a very different type of project, given the age and not knowing what's in there, no lining, all of that.
Yeah, so we did a project, I think it was in New York, Hudson Bay. I think it was Hudson Bay. It was roughly the same type of a thing, dump sites, and they dig it home. But, it's not very often where we have a site this big and don't have more punch holes in the middle of it for data for soil borings, to have a better idea of the depth and what that's going to look like.
About the same size as well?
Oh, I don't know about size. I'd have to look into the acreage on that site. This is a very large site, and no one knows how deep it goes.
And to me, that's important to know, because we all know that there are ways that it can be done, but is it truly feasible? And I know putting the money aside, which we can't do, but is it feasible, and what are the risks of doing that, because we don't know?
Yeah, and it's probably going to end up, it's probably going to be a long-term project. I think are in our 20-year, I think they just bid out the 21st year of the sandstone excavation in Sandstone, Minnesota. That's a project we work on with Minnesota Department of Agriculture every year. And they have a certain amount of dollars that they do, and we're going to dig this area this year. We're going to dig this year, and then it goes out for bid, and they bid each chunk. So that might be what you end up with in a staged process with something like this. It just depends on what you find with that data. Once they get that lab back, it's going to tell you a lot more about what you have in that fill space and how bad it is, and then you can make your determinations like, oh, this space, this is bad. Let's get rid of the spot, or let's focus here, not over here right now. And you make those money determinations at that point.
Just one final follow-up, at least I hope it's a final one. As far as the treatment services or treatment systems, it's not just digging it up and hauling it to another location and dumping it. It sounded like incineration was the primary way to deal with what you're digging up.
That's really gonna depend on your lab. Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you run into, like the 1,4-dioxane. Um, I believe it's 1 part per billion is the landfill limit. So once you get over that, you require a thermal treatment. And, that's your hazardous waste incineration type process. So your lab is really gonna tell you a lot about your options.
They go with incineration volume capacity. We're talking about large volume here.
Mhm.
Anything to say about that?
I mean, I'm not gonna say that it wouldn't be a challenge, but every place is a challenge. So it's having a network that you can spread it out through and say, you may not go to one facility, you might have to use 5 different incinerators, to get the volume moved. But I don't think that's going to be necessarily a massive struggle with this location. Only because, like we talked about the water, there's only gonna be a certain part of the year that you really gonna be able to work on the space. It's not going to be something, this isn't in Arizona where you can work on it 12 months out of the year. It's gonna be, you've got a window, and it's probably gonna be a 3 or 4 month window every year where you can work on this spot. And that's about it.
Thank you. You were,
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So speaking of challenges, this site is very complicated. Curious professionally what you view as the most complicated part of this whole site.
For me right now, I think it's the unknown part of it. You're trying to make a plan and you're not knowing your limitations with that lab. And that lab is really going to tell you a lot about, what's possible with what you've got to deal with.
And this is maybe not quite what we've been talking about with removal and taking the waste off. But I'm curious if you have an opinion on if this site was turned into a landfill. How viable is that in your mind?
So when you get that lab back, if you find that it's hazardous waste, once you pull it out, you need to manage it as hazardous waste. So if you're going to build a landfill on site to put this into, it's going to have to be a hazardous waste landfill. Now, I mean, I guess we're in the room where they would tell us if you can get a permit for a hazardous waste landfill in a site that floods. I don't know, how that works. I don't construct landfills. So, we have a team at Clean Harbors that does that for us when they build our spells and everything, but that's going to be a piece of it. And so if you do put a landfill on the site like that, it might be a question of only some of it goes in that, and some of it is bad enough where you don't want to keep it there forever. And you want to move it to a place where you don't have to manage that leachate in perpetuity, where you don't have to worry about breakthroughs and the liability of that piece of it.
Sort of a hybrid option maybe of moving some or keeping.
Right, yeah, with Clean Harbors, when you, for us specifically, we take the liability when we accept it into our facilities. So that liability share is also something to keep in mind.
want to keep us on schedule. I also want to take the full opportunity for questions as well. Are there more questions?
One more question. Regarding the incineration, what would be involved in order to set up an incineration site on sites? There's not the large transportation problem. Oh, I got a cramp. Is it possible to construct an incineration site locally so you don't have to transport it all halfway across the country?
There is. So there's an economy of scale you get moving it to a place where it's set up to do that permanently, in terms of your fuels, your processing, and in my opinion, the most important part is the emissions controls that you get when you have your permanent site. So we operate with, they call it maximum achievable control technologies. And so it's basically the best at the time to remove the emissions. So we've done a lot of testing. The last one, I think we just spent $600-some thousand, I think almost $700,000 on testing for products of incomplete destruction for PFAS specifically. It was the aim of that one, to prove that, we're not creating a problem for tomorrow. So you don't get all those pieces when you set up a site. So it depends on what you're trying to mitigate and what those levels are. And that lab is really going to tell us a lot more about the viability of doing that. But it is something that we've done.
It's not even within the range of consideration to construct the local burn unit.
It is. It just depends on what contaminants of concern you have with what you're trying to manage.
Okay, we still need additional information to make that determination.
I think that would be wise. Yeah.
Okay.
Just my quick math, this is over 80,000 rail cars, just so you know. Could be wrong, my math could be wrong, but it's over 80,000.
A lot of burning.
Well, we're transporting, be over 80,000 rail cars.
Yeah.
Just to keep that in mind.
All right, let's move to break. I saw you had your hand up, Tom. I heard you're willing to stick around. To answer other
Yeah,
questions.
we can hang around. And like I said, my phone number's in there, my email's in there,
All right, go to break. We'll come back at 10:15. Are you ready to present, Narayan?
Oh, yeah. Are we ready to go?
We're ready.
Okay, sorry. Okay, morning, everyone. So Narayan here with WSP. We've been supporting Hans and NPCA on this project for the last 3 years. So just wanted to go through some of the cleanup options. I think we've talked through some of these options previously. So we looked through the targeted waste and relocation and the filter option, so which was pretty much removing part of the waste which separates between the Battle Creek and Pigside Lake. So it's just a partial removal, a targeted waste removal, and then putting it in some kind of a filtering material to just prevent groundwater moving into these water bodies. So it's not you're not truly cleaning up the waste. It's just a filtering mechanism to reduce waste going into these water bodies. So, for this limited treatment or waste treatment, we said, okay, it's going to cost $30 million, and with the timeline being close to less than 5 years, because you're just working on a limited area, and with a O&M cost of $6 million. So pretty much it is just, keeping up with the landfill, because you truly don't have any kind of long-term treatment here. The second option was the dig and haul with no backfill. So pretty much, as we've talked about, this is just creating a bigger Pigside Lake where you dig out everything, all the waste goes off-site. And again, that's similar to some of the discussions we had, or Diane mentioned, is where does the waste go? So all that determination still needs to be made as to, does it need to get incinerated, take to a different landfill? So some of those determinations still need to be made, but it's all taking the waste from the landfill, taking it off-site, and just not backfilling it. So it just becomes a big lake and a wetland area. So for this option, we said, again, this is with an estimate of 4.5 million cubic yards of waste that needs to be taken off-site. So we came up with an estimated cost of $720 million for that, with a timeline of 8 to 10 years. And then the operating cost of 1.5 million, a 30-year. Means, again, this is pretty much just keeping up with the wetland at this point. The third option is the dig and haul with the backfill, where all the excavated material goes off-site. We get clean backfill in, it gets regraded, and pretty much it is that. It means, again, you're not, you're pretty much getting it back to condition maybe 40, 50 years back where there was no waste on site. For this cost, we said, okay, again, keeping up with 4.5 million cubic yards of waste, the construction cost is going to be close to $830 million, with a timeline of 10 plus years and with an operating cost of $6 million. The additional cost is mostly for the means between the no backfill and with the backfill, you can see most of the cost and the extra time is to get all that clean material in and to backfill, compact, and for the regrading. The last option, the dig and line, which is the new Pigside landfill, where you would pretty much build a modern landfill on the property. You would break it down into different cells and then reconsolidate the material at the landfill and create a brand new landfill, which would meet all the permit requirements of a landfill. So again, the construction cost for that is close to 570 million with a timeline of 10 plus years, where again, you're pretty much doing one cell at a time. You're excavating a certain area, consolidating it, and you're redoing it that way. And again, the 30-year operating cost on this is the highest because now you have to worry about your leachate treatment, your landfill gas management. So it's just, you have much more from an operating cost perspective. And again, all these costs are very high level costs where we've made some broad assumptions. And again, the costs are between -50 to +100%. Next slide, please. So one of the options, like Hans mentioned, we looked at this time was what happens if we build a new cover, which is a new properly designed cap that would prevent infiltration from the landfill. So what is happening right now is you just have a fill material that was put in 2004, 2005, but it wasn't a properly designed cap. So this new cap, what it would do is prevent infiltration from your rain going into the landfill and adding to the leaching of the contaminants within the landfill. So you could build a new proper cap, which would, you would have like topsoil on the bottom, you'll have a soil drainage beneath that, then you'll have a clay cap, and then a geomembrane. So this properly designed cap would do two things, is move water away from the landfill into Battle Creek and Pig's Eye Lake. So it's not all infiltrating into the landfill. But since we are not digging all the way down, so you would not have a bottom liner. So you would still have some of that residual leaching happening with just the groundwater moving up and down within the landfill. So you're still going to have some of that leaching happening, but you would reduce quite a bit of the superficial leaching that is going into the landfill. And the cost for this is, again, what you're doing is, moving the material the top 3 feet and regrading the landfill. So we're estimating the cost to be close to 100 million with a 5% grade so that you grade it. And there's the next slide, which shows what the current topography looks like and then what it would look like. So we are estimating the cost to be close to 100 million, and just some unsuitable material, like if it's hazardous waste. So some of that extra material would get disposed off-site, and with a 30-year O&M cost of $6 million. So on this slide, I think this gives you a good visual overview of, you can see where the yellow area is the current topography. So you can see on like Battle Creek on the center, and to the west, you can see huge areas that are pretty much flat. So what is happening currently is all the rain is pretty much infiltrating right into the landfill. So you don't have a proper slope or drainage to move that water away from the landfill. And this is pretty consistent on both the sides of the landfill. As you can see, it's pretty, even on the eastern side of the landfill, where it goes into Pig's Eye Lake, you can see it's pretty much flat. Sorry. So what the plan would be is we would regrade the site with, at a 5% grade. So you get this slope. You may have to get in some clean material if needed, and you would build a cap, a 3.5 foot cap. Now this would drain your water away from the landfill into Battle Creek and into Pig's Eye Lake. So this would truly help with some of the infiltration that is currently happening. So again, just a quick graphic representation of what it looks like and what we, would benefit from this. Next slide, please. Any questions before I move to the dig and line landfill option?
Ryan, can you say, would the waste footprint change with the new cover only option?
So some of the waste footprint along the edges, yes, would change, because we're taking, as we develop the grade, so as you move from the, the edges of the landfill, yes. So we are reconsolidating quite a bit of that area. Sorry, I don't have that number on hand as to what that reduced footprint would look like, but you are reducing maybe close to 20% of the landfill footprint, which is pretty much the edges of the landfill.
I have a question. Would this build up the waste to be above the groundwater? Some of it is sitting in groundwater today. Or would this keep it at the same level so we would still have waste in groundwater, especially during flood events?
Yeah, so that is not changing. Yes, so so some of your waste is still going to be sitting inside, because what you're truly doing is excavating maybe the top 3 or 4 feet. And we have seen groundwater being anywhere from 6 feet. Again, it depends where you're on the landfill. So if you're closer to the lake, then your water table is close to 6 feet. But as you go to the central part of the landfill and closer to the rail, then you're close to maybe 11 to 12 feet. So yeah, so you're not, maybe in some areas you might get into, depending on where the water table is, but for most part, you'd still have significant amount of waste inside the water table.
Just one other quick question. Do you have an estimate on that material that in the cross section, how what the volume of, like, let's say it's some sort of fill, about how much you'd need to make that?
So we estimated maybe as high as 2 million cubic yards we might need. Means again, but that is clean material. Means again, to get that grade, we might need up to 2 million cubic yards of clean fill to get that grade across the landfill on both the sides of the landfill.
Okay.
But again, in this case, we would probably, means, even though we are adding to the volume of the landfill, but this would be, how do you say, waste that would be, or fill that would be characterized, that whatever clean fill you get, you would, characterize it to make sure it has no impact. It is clean dirt, which is, you can support pollinator habitat. So you would truly make sure the topsoil and everything that is coming in would not add to any more liability at the site.
Right. Yeah, and I guess just for reference, so the islands out there, that's about 450 million yards. Or 450,000 yards rather, sorry. So, so we're like, that'd be like 5 times as much sand about for other suitable material.
Yeah, and just like if you look from an elevation perspective, you are adding close to maybe 30 to 40 feet of elevation. So that's what is happening. I don't know if you can go back to the previous slide, please. Yeah, means you can see where you're raising the elevation. Means if you're almost at 700, you're raising the elevation to close to almost 740 to get that grade. So yeah, so you are, it's again, it just helps because right now you pretty much have flat areas across the landfill.
Ryan, can you put into some context, like the environmental benefit of what's currently potentially coming out of the landfill into the environment or the Mississippi right now by avoiding that permeability into the top layer, given the groundwater coming from underneath?
I think as we complete, because right now I don't know what the concentrations in the soil are. Means I think that's been one of those mystery questions, is what's truly in the waste? What are the concentrations within the waste? How much of it has already leached into the groundwater over time? So if it is concentration which is already in the groundwater, if that is just moving up and down, versus what's the concentration within the waste, and then what is that infiltration rate, and then how much of it is truly, so that is part of the modeling we are looking to complete by the end of the year, is to answer some of those questions, is the volume of contamination or the mass of contamination within the landfill within the groundwater. So what does that mass balance look like? So I don't have all of those answers, means as to, how much of it is from the groundwater moving up and down versus the true infiltration from superficial infiltration. Can I move forward, Hans? Or any more questions?
Keep going.
So again, just to add more context to the dig and line option. So I think we looked at this where we said you have Mississippi River to the left, you have the metro plant, and then you build a new landfill, which would meet all the permit requirements. You would design it to have a liner, leachate control, landfill gas control. And then just the cost being $570 million over a 10-year period. And then, this just gives you a visual representation of what it looks like with respect to the Battle Creek Park. Next slide, please. So when we developed this $570 million cost, so again, we made some broad assumptions, means we are dealing with a landfill volume of 4.5 million cubic yards of waste. Some of that waste is inside the water table. So once we excavate it, how much more clean material do we need to get in to get it above the water table, so that you're still not building a landfill inside the water table? Completing the current design investigation, what does the topography look like? What is the environmental investigation that needs to be completed with respect to characterizing the waste? How much waste? Because we still don't have we still need to determine, because the waste depth changes within the landfill. So we just completed some of that investigation over the last month. And in some cases, you have waste at 6 feet, some cases all the way down to 25 feet. So we are seeing a big variation in the depth of the waste. So, so we want to complete that part of the investigation with understanding the waste, the mass in the waste, and how do we want to characterize that. And then the last piece is the geotech investigation. So again, the geotech investigation is important because you want to determine your slope stability, how much settlement are you going to have, because once you consolidate all that waste within the landfill, what is that weight of that landfill going to be? Are you going to create any settlement issues? What is the slope going to look like? So we need to complete the geotech investigation. And then the permitting and public meetings means there is a lot of permitting that would need to go through in a site like this, just because you have significant water bodies. So you'll have to go through multiple local, state, federal permitting, means NEPA permitting. So you'll have to go through a lot of these permitting, means again, working with FAA, just other agencies that have a vested interest. So there is going to be a lot of that permitting work that needs to be done. And then just from a landfill construction perspective, what does that cell development look like? Building a landfill with a liner. What are the collection systems from a leachate collection system? And then right now we have not included costs for treating the leachate. And the anticipation is we can move it to transfer it to MCES treatment plant, and then the landfill cap and gas collection system. So because the leachate treatment is also going to be a big part once we understand what that looks like. Because we would have to then again model some of that as to understanding what that leachate concentration might be. Because we know the groundwater concentrations, but just from a future leachate collection system, what that would be. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits? So two things we're going to look at as benefits and challenges. So from a benefit perspective, I think it does a great thing, is keeps the waste on site. You're not moving waste from Pig's Eye to another landfill, or just, pretty much moving from one side to another side. And then, but what it would do is right now it's an unpermitted landfill. So it would be a properly designed landfill, as we've talked about, you're managing leachate, you're managing emissions. So it would be a properly designed landfill, which would meet all your requirements of a landfill. You prevent any more leaching of contaminants in the groundwater. So, we've talked about maybe we've talked about you having leaching happening from the top, and then some of the leaching happening from the bottom. So you would prevent both of those in this scenario with the new landfill, because you would have a liner at the bottom of the landfill, which prevents any more infiltration from the bottom as well. And then you have the landfill gas emissions. And then what it does is it gives you more space as to, from a reuse perspective, means do you want to convert it into a park or whatever that might be, or just, from hiking, whatever you want to do. So does it give you more options from a landfill reuse perspective? And then the last one is just reduced impacts to the transportation network in that local surrounding region. Means if you have hundreds of trucks moving in and out daily, is it just from a transportation perspective, does it benefit the area? So those are some of the broader benefits. And then we can look at some of the challenges on the next slide, please. So again, from a construction perspective, means the worker health and safety. I think whenever you're excavating waste that you don't know what it is, I think we've talked about asbestos, and maybe other hazardous material that you might encounter. So worker safety is always paramount. So you'd have to have a stringent plan as to how that worker safety is, how do they work safely. So that is a big part. I think we've talked about flooding. So how do you manage drainage and the surface water control? Means do you build swales? Do you build ditches to move water away? Because what truly you would do is you're building a one cell at a time. So you're rebuilding, not like you're not going to have 200 acres all open at the same time. So you're going to rebuild the landfill in segments. And so what you could do is build swales, smaller retention ponds or ditches where you can move the water away from your active excavation area. But again, there might be certain times, just because of how prone that area is to flooding, where we might not be able to do anything. And there might be times where we might just have to wait for a month or two for it to be suitable for excavation or construction again. But just given how big the landfill is, we might be able to, look through but again, that all goes into the construction planning part of things. Just the slope stability means having the right, from a design perspective, you're looking at the slope stability and settlement, because those are the two critical things. And then we talked about site coordination. This is where are we looking to remove some of the, bigger metal things? How do you coordinate construction within a large property like this? Means the recycling part, if we do any of that, or just segregation of waste, understanding what is hazardous, non-hazardous, or even the current clean or fill we have on top, can we reuse any of that? So again, just segregating the different type of material on site is important. The bigger thing, I think, in this is what is the impact of the neighboring properties? Because once you build this landfill, we still need to figure out is you have the St. Paul Airport on the other side of the river, you have CP Rail just on the north side, and then you have MCES. So I think what does this do from a topography change and building this landfill? What does it impact the neighboring properties? Means I think that's a bigger discussion we need to have. And then just the utility means you'd have to run new utility to the landfill. And then just the whole, from a transportation planning, because you're still going to have a lot of equipment on site that is, from a rebuilding the landfill. So how do you manage the transportation part of it? Next slide, please. That's pretty much it. Any questions?
You mentioned a bigger discussion on affecting neighboring properties like the Metro plant. When or how would we have that discussion?
I think for me is how does that, just from the topo change, does that impact operations? And again, that's a broader discussion. Because, for example, the Metro plant, from what I understand, is you guys have your own dewatering system. So if I have, pumps running from a leachate collection system, does that impact any of your dewatering systems? So I think those are and again, from CP rail perspective is, once that landfill is built, if does that, if I say, example, have 100-foot high landfill, how does that impact any of their operations? Means because we'll have to build swales, drainage systems across the landfill. Does that impact from a broader perspective what happens to CP rail? And again, I think we've talked about FAA too, because they have concerns about the landfill height and what that might be from the flight path perspective as well.
Wondering also about flood. If there's a larger feature in the landscape here, does that impact the flood functionality of your flood wall at all? Don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, some of the superficial water drainage too, as to how does that impact. Means again, we would try to mitigate some of that as part of the design planning. But again, it just goes into a broader planning as to what the grades are, how the MCA is situated, where would, what would the find, means again, some of the discussion even as to what happens to Battle Creek. Means, are we going to build 2 landfills on either side of the creek? Or is there a way to realign Battle Creek? Means, so there are a lot of questions that need to be answered from that perspective.
What's that estimate on the current height that landfill would be? I know you showed the sort of schematic comparing to the heights of other things nearby, but what's that number?
I think we are, depending on what the slope and grade might be, anywhere from 80 feet to 150 feet.
And is that's assuming all the current material that's on site is staying on site and adding to that height?
That is correct. Yeah, you're going to use as much as possible, again, unless there is certain material that can't be reused, but otherwise, yes. So you would reduce the footprint of the landfill and consolidate it. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, just back to the conversation on the neighboring properties. Would that be something needed to be decided earlier or once we get into design after we decide to move forward on the construction? Can you kind of parse out?
I think some of it needs to happen before. Just some of the discussions we've had with the airport, Metropolitan MAC, and even just CP Rail, I think they want to know more as to what that remedial option is and how would it impact them. Means I think some of it does need to happen before then we make the decision that, oh, we want to build a landfill, and then they're having issues with it. Means I think it's at least getting an initial understanding or educating them of what we've thought about. So there might be some upfront work that needs to, because they're going to have questions like, for example, when we had the discussion with the FAA, some of the discussions, they were like, what is your landfill height going to be? And we said, our initial assumptions are maybe 80 to 150, means again, just a broad number. And they said, but that might change depending on what the flight path is, and we might have issues with it. So I think there might be, more on our end, and because we need to know better, because typically what in some of the projects I've done is they would tell you, okay, at a minimum, you can't be any higher than 80 feet. So what they would need to do is say, what is that minimum height that they would be okay with? And after that point, because based on the flight path, and then you would then need to either do a detailed design or from a risk evaluation as to what would it be from a flight path if we had to be at 100 feet. So then they would have to do some evaluation on their perspective too, from what that looks like.
I don't know what the answer is, but before we would say this is like a preferred alternative, I think we do need to identify the major risks nearby and take them off the table somehow. At least just say, we think we can mitigate them. For instance, impacts to the flood wall around the metro plant. That's our most important asset. That wall fails, where millions of infrastructure are lost. So it can't have an impact on that. And then, like you said, the pumping systems for under drains and groundwater dewatering should work well together if that's designed. And there's probably additional other considerations just due to the industrial nature of what we're doing there on that site that want our technical people involved.
The whole floodplain question, I mean, that would be definitely a permit. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, it would not be permittable. And not raise the floodplain.
Yeah, I don't think we want to change. I mean, it's just going to be from a construction perspective, and doesn't so yeah. So means again, this would all again. That's why there's a lot of permitting that would need to happen with respect to building this new landfill. Means I don't think it's just like any other typical landfill that you get permitted for from just waste, what type of waste. But in this case, I think we have a lot of natural resources close by. So permitting is going to be a big part of it.
Are there any case studies to speak to the indirect impact of the neighboring home values in Dayton's Bluff and all the way down to Highwood Hills? I mean, right now those neighborhoods don't know necessarily that they're sitting on a landfill. So when they go to list a home, it's not impacted by a large mound that everybody asks questions about. And so where would we go to find out more information about the potential indirect impacts on the neighboring home values for the city of St. Paul and Ramsey County?
So that's not a well-researched area. We come up with the same issue when we do environmental review for any landfill. And so there is some information along that area, but it's not robust area of research.
I'd like to go back to the issue of the floodplain. I kind of heard two different things here, so I want to know which one is accurate. That what this proposal would not change the floodplain, but it would, I mean, obviously it has to go through permitting and all of that. But does it change the floodplain if we were to go forward with it or not?
Actually, that's not the intent to change the floodplain, but I think as we look at the broader perspective of once you build, depending on the height of the landfill, the footprint of the landfill, means again, yeah. So, but that's not the intent. Means again, we are not actively looking to change that.
Okay.
It would have to be evaluated.
Yes. Thank you.
We reached the public comment time. Are there more questions before we move to public comment? Move into public comment. Again, state your name for the record if you have a question, comment. Yeah.
Tom Diamond. I'm getting word that you're getting down towards the end of this process. And what's supposed to come out of this process is a design that cleans up the material, removes it, and restores the habitat, which is a wetland. So these plans, or some of these plans, don't do anything of the kind. They don't meet the requirement of what was being asked. And the important thing is that there's a second plan like this. In addition, that's one thing. But there needs to be a plan that meets what the legislature requested and what the legislators who authored it asked for, and the community asked for. This thing wouldn't, a pile of trash 100 feet tall down there would violate all the planning of the city's done for the critical area plan, national park plan. It fits nothing. And as a matter of fact, directly as opposed to the views from the bluff, which are supposed to be protected to the river, but plenty of other reasons. So it's cheaper, still a hell of a lot of money, but serves none of the purposes that are supposed to be done. I think that it's very helpful to have Clean Harbors because they know how to do what was asked. And I think that particularly when you talk about that, you look at it doing it cell by cell, you can stage it over a period of time, getting this cleaned up and work through it. Filling or adding fill or moving that material around on the site makes no sense at all. And as I say, it does not meet the goals. So I really hope that you ensure that a plan is developed out of this that shows what the legislature asked for us for. We're protecting, enhancing actually the habitat and cleaning up the site. And the habitat depends on removing that material, not piling it up. And if you have a facility, a big pile like they had, and you've got this lined so you get the runoff, besides impacting it just there on the site, impact on the rest of the area around it with this big object that also couldn't have vegetation on it. I suspect not trees and stuff like that, because it wouldn't be allowed with the protect the they have the runoff that they want. So it would alter the planning for this area dramatically and would not be received at all well by the community, I can assure you. So I don't understand the point of it. And I certainly, whatever you do, hope you have at least a plan that shows what was asked for. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ron Cockrell. And catching up to you folks, appreciate everything that you've done with this and you're doing with it. I now understand what dump we're talking about. So had a chance to look into it. I'm just wondering, I guess the idea of actually going in and rebuilding a up-to-date and actual dump is, I think, is probably a pretty good idea. Wondering if you would consider, you know, the ownership, I understand, is Parkland, so you know they're the underlying owner of it. Would that owner be willing to take all of that material that's landfill and accept it basically on the east side of 61 and put this big pile into the bluff properly out of the water channel and make the parkland as the legislator would like to see happen, and we can hide this pile right there on the parkland? That's my thought. Again, thank you for everything that you've done doing. Thank you.
I'm one of the Pigside Park friends, Kathy Seidel, have walked in the park every Tuesday for 12 years. We're on Facebook. So the creek does flow backwards. We had the 8th biggest flood last June. And when it does, it leaves trash. So from the rest of the state, so it's not all our trash. There's what I call a poop pipeline, big one from Battle Creek neighborhood through the park. So it would be great to have that on the map, right in the middle of the park where you're going to put this big mountain along Battle Creek, shows up in the wood chip area. There's been at least two train spills just in the 4 years since we've been doing it. We have a spill bill. They have to have a plan to remediate it next time. They have millions of dollars into a new place that's all designed within the present Battle Creek, right at the railroad tracks, to detect it and stop it until they can get there and fix their spill. As far as any kind of work in the park, there's something called Birdcast. They can look at the weather people, their radar, and they can tell how many birds are going over at what height. And so I'm hoping that people really realize you don't have to just like kill all the birds so one plane doesn't hit a blue heron that isn't even living in the park. And then it's associated with eBird data. People like me upload so you can see what birds were likely going through. A lot of them, aren't big. This morning, met a guy, I guess he works for security with the waste place. And he said a friend of his spent time with her grandma growing up in a coffee get together where one person was the person who secretly took 3M had him take tubs to this landfill and bury them back in the day. So good luck figuring out where stuff is. Although I would think an archaeologist, they can figure out where all kinds of stuff is if these big drums still have chemicals and PFAS in them. And then all the great data from the tubes 20 feet down is online on your website. And so I grabbed it. So you guys should, that maybe it's been done, you haven't seen it, but when I did it, when it's 10 above 10 million times units of whatever was being used, then it shows up mostly along the creek on each side. This north and south of ridge is the highest, and then only up to 10 million, whatever the units are, is kind of scattered more around the park or whatever that's worth. And the last thing is there's this huge pile of dirt there from sewer construction. Who knows what's in that? And nobody wants it. It's supposed to get out of the park, but it's like 5 times bigger footprint than this room and 5 times higher. And they bring in when somebody does want some and they shake the rocks out. And the rocks always go away. Somebody wants rocks, I guess, but the dirt remains. But I could imagine using something like that for whatever happens. And I'm in favor, like Tom, of disposing of it correctly, not just keeping it there and not putting it in a different landfill, but like this company does, try to just do what we should have done way back then, just bringing those costs forward. But when the bill looks pretty high. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you for your comment. Really happy to.
One last thing was the map, because it's concerning to a lot of us that we're only talking about one part of the former dump, not what I call North Pigside. Kiki calls the fish hatchery, where the homeless tent campers are on top of 2 feet of soil that's contaminated. Not a good thing, much less for any hikers there. And this land, the map, I requested that the next map not just show who's involved with what area, but exactly what we're working on, because this is only the southern part, and we're, from what I was just told, kicking the can down the road for the northern part of the landfill, plus what's under the wood chip facility, not part of it. Or is it? We'll find out if it goes on the map. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Really happy to hear you were able to use the groundwater contamination analyst to learn more about the site and get the data. Glad it was useful for you.
Well, no, that, so, and thank you for listening. It's on our Facebook page, November 4th, but somebody else might want to do that, not because it matters that some is only sort of bad and the rest is really bad, but it's just something to add in to help figure out what to do. And don't forget about that big, very that it's very costly, or the railroad structure that we spent a lot of time working on to put in there. That's all based on exact on Battle Creek that we just go, oh, let's just change the creek, you know. So, thank you.
Before we go to comments online, are there more comments from the room?
I was just gonna say that, another one of the regulatory problems with the one proposal, the 100-foot tall mound, is that area is zoned, it's got multiple zonings, but the highest zoning is it's parkland for the critical area, the national park standing. And so you'd actually get a permit to build a dump site in a park zoning. Don't think there's any allowance for that. Park zoning, I'm not quite sure not, so. It seems to be in violation of numerous provisions within the code and
Understand what you're saying.
And it was to go to the north dump and the south dump. It both could be moved to east of 61, hide it in the bluff out of the water. That was part two of that thought. Thank you.
Smaller fish hatchery dump on the north, different site, also in our regulatory programs, but then there's also the pig side dump, which is the main focus of the task.
It's all tied together because the northern lake, you have all the water coming out of Beaver Lake, coming down, making the northern part of the lake. You got Battle Creek, so you got both of those body of waters flushing through what might be the new dump. So if you get it out of there altogether and bring this all back to what it should have been. Honestly, yeah. Thank you.
Let's move to public comment from anyone online. Well, how you would do this would be raise your hand. We will unmute you and state your name for the record and yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead with comment. You're muted. If you're speaking, we're unable to hear you.
Are you talking to Kimber or?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. It seems to me that capping, although cheaper, seems to have more future costs, especially given the unknown properties of the contents. And perhaps some other the impacts of having a large hill like that on the other structures, just like y'all were bringing up. And I just wonder, you know, it's shocking to see a $720 million bill, and that's probably, again, given the unknown nature of the content of the dumps, that seems, you know, untenable. But I would argue that it seems better to go ahead with the initial completely removing, less impact to everything surrounding it, especially given that this area floods and water does what water does. I live on the bluff and I know all about water in my house. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for participating. Appreciate that. Good. Next person is
Jody Massey.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Jody Massey. I'm the interim executive director of Great River Passage Conservancy, and I think it's really, thank you so much for all of your work. I want to echo what the previous person just said about kind of the long-term implications for whatever decision we make. I think one of the things we need to think about is making sure we're just not kicking a can down the road, ensuring that whatever we do, we think about people who are going to be here 50 years from now. If we know anything about in our organization about master plans and planning, it's that we talk a lot about things, and then, we really would love to make sure that we're not just talking about things 50 years from now, but that we've actually solved the issue. I would encourage you, if you have a chance, to join Kathy or Tom someday. If you schedule some time, 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, to go join them for a walk. I had a chance to do that with Tom last week. And when you're on the ground, it's a really different experience than we're sitting in meetings. And it is a really beautiful environment. It is an asset for our community. And I would just, there are more implications as opposed to just how much it's going to cost right now. So thank you so much for all your work. It's been exciting to be a part of it on the peripheral here, and look forward to seeing how we can better connect St. Paul and our river. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments. Let's keep going. We have some slides, I think, that are next. So this is what it would look like if we take the dig and haul and backfill off the table and replace it with a new cover. This would be the new 4 options. There would be. Going to the task force discussion. So, obviously, anything what we should talk about today that's helpful. One thing we were thinking about before the meeting, we were hearing some movement or the beginning of a path to perhaps land on what the remediation options might be, what the remediation recommendations of the task force may be. So that gets us to this question: how would your organization rank the remediation options? That's something we expect you to answer today. This is a seed, planting a seed for perhaps the next meeting. Go back and talk to your organization. What things are important to you? What things you think can be taken off the table right now? Understanding that likely taking off the table and dig and haul and backfill. What are the concerns of your organization? How does that fit into this question that is before all of you? The remediation options.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate all that's the amount of information that's been provided to us. I think one thing that I want to make sure is understood, at least from my perspective, Ramsey County's perspective, is the money is obviously something that we have to deal with, but we have to deal with that whether it's 30 million or 720 million. That's one factor, but it's not the main factor for us anyway. So I know a couple of people have mentioned the cost, and I can't not mention the cost, but at the same time, it's not the deciding factor for me. It's what makes sense for the environment for me. I think that, when this task force was put together, it was put together to come up with what are the options and which one would be recommended, which is where we're getting closer and closer now. It seems like it was just yesterday, and it seems like it's been a long time as well. But I think that if there were just one answer, we wouldn't be a task force. I mean, if the legislature said, well, we'll, come back to us and tell us how much it would cost to dig it out and put it someplace else, that's what they would have asked. And that's not what our charge was. Our charge was to figure out how we can deal with the environmental concerns, because there are significant environmental concerns with just removing everything too and trying to put it someplace else. So it sounds like it's an easy thing to say and do, but it really isn't. So I guess I'm just kind of meandering with my thoughts here, but I know that each and every one of us takes this very seriously and want to make sure that we do something to try and mitigate what has happened there. Well, and part of it is we don't know exactly what's happened there, but we do know or have some knowledge on what would happen with each of these options. None of them are going to be perfect. Some have as I've learned over the last year and a half or so, some of them have even more environmental or health and safety concerns than I would have imagined. Because sometimes, I don't even know how to frame it, but it seems like the obvious answer maybe isn't from a health and wellness and safety standpoint for the environment. So I plan to, in fact, I'm going to a meeting with some of the Ramsey County commissioners following this today, and I'm going to talk to them about sitting down and maybe having a workshop as we get closer to being able to present something so that they have the information that they need. I've been keeping them in the loop, but we're getting to the point where it needs to be a serious discussion and talking about all the different aspects of it. So I just, again, this was going to be easy and just pick one thing and go with it. We wouldn't have needed a task force to do that. But the information that's been provided has really been mind-boggling in some ways. What did you say? 80,000? I mean, the feasibility of some of these things, even if we could do it, it wouldn't get us where we need to be. And that's something that's a little bit safer. And that we can justify to the legislature, that we would need to justify to the legislature, whatever option we choose. Why we think it's the most feasible option, primarily from a public health and safety perspective. That's where I'm coming at from this. And I know that that's what my colleagues on the Ramsey County Board have talked about, is how do we make sure that we meet that ultimate goal of having this task force in place.
I've said this before, but I'm going to keep saying it until this task force is done, is that we're focused on this site. I understand why people are interested in what happens with this site, but we cannot ignore that there's an impact. If this material is bad to have here, also going to be negative wherever it gets moved to, if it gets moved, right? And the costs here, the 570 million or the 720 million, do not include the indirect costs absorbed by the community that this waste gets moved to, right? Because those costs are not zero. In fact, in some instances, they could be substantial, because it takes up existing landfill airspace that permitted now goes away, right? Goes away for the future. If the revenues that jurisdiction might get off of that go away. And then the whole idea that this is waste where this is area that our future waste generation will go to, right? The airspace then gets filled up. So in the future, the waste is going to have to travel far. So this, under both scenarios here, waste is going to have to be hauled, right? It's, do we haul it now and free up and fill up existing airspace, or do we haul our waste later from all of our houses and all of our businesses, right? Because the airspace for landfills that's close is limited. But we have this space that's already been used. Should it have been there? No. Right. But we can construct a safe landfill protected with the environment and at this site without moving the waste a long ways and while spending several $100 million more of direct costs. And I would probably argue hundreds of millions more in indirect costs. That's even ignoring the political costs of trying to move this much material to somebody else's jurisdiction, right? Nobody out there saying, bring me 4.5 million yards of waste. Guarantee that there's nobody out there saying it. Next.
At the risk of reiterating a lot of what's been said and what I've said in the past, but I went back after our last meeting and looked at the enabling legislation, right? Just to try and refamiliarize myself with the goals of the task force, et cetera. And there is not a preset or preordained outcome. There isn't this is what has to be done on the site, a full removal, et cetera, elsewhere. If there were, I think the legislature would have just said, hey, MPCA,
this is what you're doing with the site. There's not a preordained or preset outcome in terms of what the restoration it precisely would be. Again, that would have been part of a direction to the MPCA and not actually funding, which the legislature did, a task force to come up with this. I appreciate all of the work that has been done and the folks we've had have come in and talked to us and the conversations here, because I think rarely have I been on this long of a term of, a board, task force, et cetera, where the membership has stayed the same, which I think has been really helpful to hear everybody's insight with it, people's experiences and knowledge with it. And I think that, right, there are obviously, as we've looked through it, pros and cons, competing interests. If it were simple, we would have had 3 meetings and been done. It's not simple, it's not easy, and there isn't a perfect solution. There isn't any funding in the city of St. Paul to perform this work. And I'd imagine at a lot of your entities or the county or state, et cetera, you get a lot of the same answers. So the ability to do something while cost might not be the determination, the ability to do anything is sort of constrained by where funding can be found to do it. And that's just the reality, I think, of the world that we are in with this. That being said, the idea of, specifically to the question about, ranking, et cetera, I don't know that this group necessarily, maybe this little seed I'll plant now, has to have an outcome in the report, but rather perhaps a preferred outcome, outlining precisely why it is the preferred way to go, but an other option as well. And it's less preferred because, and being able to really, articulate well why the preferred outcome is preferred, but an other option as well. Or even an option with a preferred long-term goal or outcome, something like that. I think it's too complex to simply be able to do this, find money, good luck. I think if that's a report, that's perhaps one that might sit on a shelf for a while, and nobody wants any of this work to sit on a shelf. We all want to improve the site for all of the reasons that we know. So my 2 cents about, a preferred outcome, but making sure we've got all of the analysis and the work that's been done to date to be able to pass along to the legislature.
Other thoughts, discussion? They're important.
Can you talk a little bit more about new cover with the pollinator habitat? How does that work? I mean, what are those options?
You're interested in learning about the pollinator habitat?
Yeah.
Yeah, so part of this is what we would do anyway, and also this governor's executive order or any landfill activity when we do work on a closed landfill, there's a governor's executive order, we establish pollinator habitat on the new cover. So for example, the WDE construction project, when that was done, the last stage of the project was establish pollinator habitat on the cover. We have other projects we've done the same thing. So that's what the end would look like. I'm not sure I'm answering your question though, exactly.
Well, I'm trying to figure out what this would look like rather than just a big mountain.
That's what it would look like. A big green mound is what it would look like.
And would it be something that, because pollinator means the plantings and things like that?
Yes.
Okay, and would it be something that could be walked on? I mean, is it, so it's not, when I think of a mountain, I don't think, gee, I think I'll climb that mountain. Well, some people do, but I don't think about climbing mountains. But is it something that would be usable for trails and things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it would, and you could also argue in some ways it would enhance some recreation options. Perhaps some options that are more active, the elevation could be a benefit. It would also detract from other recreation options where if you have an expectation of a more natural space, it would likely detract from that experience. So it would be both. Recreation is definitely possible on the landfill cap. Yep. As well as pollinator habitat, as well as solar reuse. Those are all possible reuse options on a new landfill.
It would be helpful to see, as we're looking at the different options here, a visual. Because again, when I think of a mountain, I don't think of something that I could necessarily go every day and walk on it. And so just some visuals so that we could see what the different options would.
Yeah, that cross section they put up
the scale is hard to
Yeah.
imagine, because, I mean, yeah, it's tall, but it said it's a 5% grade, so it's really like as steep as the sidewalk, right? This is a
Hans?
very
Okay.
flat.
Yes.
That is very helpful.
Does
Thank
the,
you.
does the task force have the ability to authorize to that point a 3D model of what that would look like? I think to what you're asking, it will be eye-opening for everybody to see what that looks like. So if there's ability through MPCA, the task force, whatever, to do a 3D printing through the county library system, whatever, I think that would be helpful for what I think that's Dr. Reinhardt's asking. I'm not seeing anybody, I'm just hearing. And if that's who that is, right?
Yes.
Speaking?
Yes.
Yes. I agree. This is a very difficult decision. Since the beginning, it's not a new Pig's Eye Lake. It's the Pig's Eye Lake was what I would like to see. But I think this task force should also, as we go back and talk to our stakeholders and come back together to many of the points that have been made, it may behoove this task force to have that hard question or have that hard recommendation about exploring new landfill methods, new partnerships with area states in this recommendation or in this outcome, because all of these things point to us in the future having an issue, whether it's capacity or toxicity. So out of this could be a good outcome for future if we could come to a consensus and be able to recommend that more resources be spent on or looked at what that means for the state of Minnesota. I think we would behoove ourselves again in this task force efforts to move something forward. This is a very difficult thing. It's all going to cost money, but if our recommendation could spur the legislature and our federal partners who are on this call to be able to allocate funds to be able to do that, I believe, again, we have other problems in this state that all come back to landfills and capacities, and we've all been witness to it. This is one of many, and however we can be helpful to our partners at MPCA, Dakota County, Ramsey County, Washington County, in putting that forward so the legislature sees a need, I think, again, that would be helpful, and I would be supportive of that as we move forward. And I know just talking with my stakeholders on my side of the river, that is an interesting and a topic that would be supported to have further discussions. So again, thanks to all the presentations. Thank you to this continuation of this task force and the listening and the mind time that we've all spent thinking and looking at this, because it is a lot of information. So again, thank you from the city of South St. Paul for all your working.
Look at what we can do with enhancing visualizations.
So when Waste Management or Republic builds a landfill, they build to maximize profit, right? As much airspace, just as small a footprint as possible. That's the cheapest way to build a landfill. If dig and line is an option that's we go forward with, we don't have to have that consideration. We can construct the landfill to meet an end use requirement or desire, right? We have some parameters we have to work with. We know we have a volume we have to fit, right? Can't be shallower than 3-1, can't be steeper, or can't be shallower than 5-1, can't be steeper than 3-1, right? That doesn't mean it has to be all 3-1 or all 5-1, right? Doesn't it have to be a perfect pyramid, right? It can be designed so for what the city or county wants as an asset to their park in the future, right? That will cost more, but not significantly more if you start from the beginning to build it that way. So I just think that's important. People keep that in mind when we're going forward with this.
Talking about is blending and reuse and construction at the same time, so it doesn't have to look like.
Exactly, and any approach that didn't incorporate that, I would not support.
And I think this gets a little bit to the chicken and egg piece of why remediation and restoration is there. I think one of the things that may help as you go back to your organizations is think of the components that are a high priority to you, and then let's see if we can, as Dave mentioned, put back the puzzle pieces. So today's conversation is remediation, and you can see, some of the limitations on various ones in terms of how much waste is accessible to rainwater or to the infiltration from the groundwater on the targeted waste. The new cover, we still have groundwater interactions with the waste and movement. We don't have that in the next two, but then we have space issues that many folks have talked about on it. The flip side is on remediation. We have restoration from the communities, what they're looking for. Do we want industrial uses? Do we want passive recreational uses, all just natural, or things like ballparks and that? So I think that might be one way too, because this is a very complex issue, is what are those highest priorities? And then we can help piece this together with some of these, whether it's a design or the options we pick here also. So I think we've got this slide we could send out, and I know we've got one similar on the restoration side to really help you guys have those conversations with your organizations.
I think it would be helpful to have the slide and a similar slide for restoration, just to be able to sort of have as we talk through with folks in our organizations.
And if the city wants an amphitheater, you've got all the building material right there. You just arc it around, right? I mean, I know I say that partly in jest, but this is a blank slate. If the waste stays on site, you can construct the landfill however you want.
We're gonna have that in that.
I know that. Hey, I'm a landfill inspector. I know that. But you get what I'm saying, though.
Yeah.
Not gonna build a pyramid.
Question on the timeline of that landfill option. Is that, once you've gone through any approvals and permits and everything else, then it's a 10-year start? 10 plus from that point? Ryan?
Correct, yes, yeah. I mean, typically something for this project, I think it could take anything up from 1 to 2 years to do all the permitting, the public meetings and all of that, so.
10 years after all that's complete.
Correct, yes, yeah.
As we move forward with this is Victoria. Sometimes forget people are online. One thing that's going to be helpful, because we're all here representing entities, is to be able to take something that we can make a presentation to our city councils, our counties, whatever, whether it's in a workshop, or probably that's what it would be, because they don't make a decision per se, but they need to have the information. So we've got it. But I would hope that for Ramsey County, if they wanted to have a workshop, which I will recommend, could the PCA come in, or could you provide some slides that we could provide so that it says, okay, this is, because when we have something that is the preferred option, we'll also have to discuss, as Melanie said, we have to discuss, well, what are the trade-offs with the other options as well, so that you don't get just one thing, you get the whole picture. Why was this chosen? And we need to have that, well, before we actually get to the point of making a recommendation. So we're talking a pretty tight timeline here. And what we decide today, I think, should be a way to start to get it teed up for some of the presentations that would need to be made. Does that make sense?
Some of that at a high level with the video that we did. I mean, I think what we'd want to do is aggregate some of this up along this line here, but I think we have some of those pieces that we can talk about. We have a behind the scenes, our next couple meetings mapped out. The next one is funding. We can talk more about how that works in terms of conversations that the organizations or local governments want to have too. So we have a debrief after this that we can have some of those conversations on materials we can make available or people that could be available for.
And I recognize also that this is a task force that is making recommendations to the legislature, so we don't want to get too far out ahead. But at the same time, maybe it's something that's an overview that's in writing that we can talk about something that informs the people that we're here representing. But doesn't get ahead of what our charge is to provide the information to the legislature recommendations.
This task force is representing people that are local. And I'm curious, how much of an impact does this contamination have downriver? And if it's significant, should we look at the people on both sides of the Mississippi downriver as having some input and also as potential sources of funding to help offset this? Does it dilute when it gets down further and it's not a problem to them, or do they recognize that this water contamination is a concern for them? And also, if we start doing any of these transportation methods, we've talked about barging, we talked about rail, as it goes through different states, it would have a potential for an impact on them. Have we thought of including them as far as answers of preferences and also as sources for funding?
I'll just share, we spoke with Prairie Island Indian Community. This is one of the things that they expressed to us is we're downstream. You're sending all this to us. And yes, we heard that.
But that's still again in Minnesota. But the river goes all the way to the Gulf. So if we looked at other states also for their concerns and preferences and sources.
I could, we do have, I know there's federal, honestly, when it comes to funding, we're probably looking at the feds because this is not something that we can do just in Minnesota.
Correct.
Or clearly in a county or a city. And that was recognized from the get-go here. And Representative McCollum has the Mississippi River Restoration Resilience Initiative. Thank you. I maybe put the R's in the wrong order, but they're all there. And which does talk about the entire thing, not just about this particular area, but how do we reinvest in the Mississippi River and the entire corridor? And which is why she's gotten bipartisan support for it. But that doesn't mean there's money for it yet either. But regardless, I think that it is something that's part of the picture, but for what the task force is asked to do, it is much more local. So I don't know at this point how we could expand that to bring in different voices because the legislature also decided what voices should be at this table.
Funding option, we have a couple pages of ideas that we're gonna go through, folks, in August that talk about where things may make sense or there may be some connections or where they don't. And some of the folks have mentioned certain funding sources, and unfortunately, some of those may be off the table, and we'll go through that. But those are on a local to state to federal level. So we will have that piece. In terms of the impacts further downriver to other states and that, you know, we have a lot of things between here and where it gets to other states, where other facilities that it makes it much more difficult, I would say, to have this conversation with Wisconsin, Illinois, or Iowa in terms of their contribution or preference to the funding.
Kirk, you're like referencing different potential contamination sources, right? That muddy this whole conversation, what would truly be coming from this particular site, right?
Yeah, when we start getting to other states, that there's a number of releases and or permitted discharges between here and upstream before it gets to those other states.
Site is also a good example. There's only upstream sources contributing contamination to Battle Creek, and the landfill contributes as well.
On that note of downstream communities, and I'm thinking about this from Washington County Public Health lens, I just speaking to this menu, I don't have a ranking to provide at this point, but that sort of that ethos of doing no further harm in the downstream effects as we explore all of these, that hopefully no contaminants are liberated in, you know, great quantity that Great Cloud Island and Hastings and Point Douglas areas and places downstream are bearing the brunt of that.
I'm going to end, or is there more to talk about today?
Second request for like a visualization of the dig and line option. I guess then maybe the new cover option too, if there's a way to get a visualization of what that looks like, 3D perspective. And then my other question was, what would be the minimum heights of the dig and line? 80, is it really, is 80 feet, that's what's set by the amount of waste and the required grades?
I'm going to call an engineering team for this one.
Is
Ryan.
Narayan here. Yeah, so some of it is going to be because we are still trying to determine what's the exact volume of the waste, how much of the waste is below the water table. So we made some broad assumptions, like I said, so I think right now we're thinking it's anywhere between 100 to 160 feet. But again, can we consolidate into a smaller footprint, or does it become a bigger footprint? Because right now we are saying it could be 100 acre at 100 feet, or close to 120 acres. But now, can we expand the footprint, make it a smaller height? So I think those are the kind of considerations we need to look at. But some of that, again, is as you do get into that broader design, what are the impacts? What are the permitting requirements? Means again, like we talked about FAA requirements. So how does, so we'll have to see the waste volume, height restrictions, impact to property. So yes, I think it all ties in together.
I just want to highlight really great work done by the engineering team on this and just the challenges. Like, I need a cost estimate for this option. I can't tell you how much waste is there. And there's all these other unknowns, but I still need a cost estimate. I need it fairly quickly. Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for the work you've done on this.
No, I appreciate it. No, again, happy to be part of this project. So.
And I just want to note to that point, there's that nice asterisk on it, minus 50 to 100%. So I know things, exact numbers like to be quoted and then they change later. I'm just going to note there is.
Well, and landfill tip fees for the dig and haul are not going down. So every year that number is going up substantially, I think.
Could you speak to the goals of the next couple of meetings? So we got funding discussion at the August meeting. Did we have a goal then? You said you've kind of laid out for the next few. Are we hoping to have the more broader, what are the priorities at the meetings, two meetings from today? Or is that hoping that we discuss that during the funding meeting as well?
I have to go back. I don't think either of us have it right handy right now. So we can get that back to folks on what that looks like.
Okay, yeah, I think some of it is just trying to help my own timeline of making sure I get through with who I need to speak with.
We will get back to folks on some of this other packaging of information too, so we can share that too for your planning purposes. A timeline is what I'm hearing.
Sorry.
All right, we come to the end of task force discussion. Yep. Any more task force discussion? Let's do one more opportunity for public comment, and then we'll wrap us up today.
Kiki Sonnen with Friends of Pig's Eye Park. One of the things that I hope, especially when you talk about the funding option, like have a do nothing option, and because I get the impression that everybody's real fearful because of these high costs. But the fact of the matter is, this current situation, downstream communities and the surrounding communities, they're all being negatively affected by doing nothing. Am I correct in that? We're sending pollutants hazardous to human health downriver and up into the air and into the groundwater. And so something has to be done, and it's not going to be a cheap way of getting it done. So I just think we have to remember that the impression is that it's, it's, Pig's Eye's all nice and green and little forested area and it's like, it's not dangerous, but it's a time bomb. It's ticking. It's dangerous and it needs to be cleaned up. So I think we have to always keep in mind of doing nothing or passing it on to somebody else to figure out in 20 years from now, it's not going to get any better.
This is a good place to end the meeting today. Thank you for your comment. Yeah.
I don't disagree with that at all. But I also think that we need to realize that we've got 4 options up here. I think we narrowed it down a little bit at the last meeting. But there's not going to be a perfect answer to this. And so perfect answer would have been that it didn't happen in the first place, but we can't do that. So there are issues. I mean, we're all struggling with these, with every single one of them. And one of the things that I said pretty clearly from the very beginning, doing nothing isn't an option as far as I'm concerned. But we need to weigh everything. But I think we did come up with kind of zeroing in on some that made the most sense at the last meeting, didn't we?
That's one thing I want to confirm. We're taking dig and haul and backfill off the table. We have consensus on that. These are the new 4 options. That's good. This is last call. Anything more for today? Yeah.
Did you say dig and haul?
Dig and haul and backfill. Dig and haul and backfill.
Oh.
It's off the table. Now back was off the table. You have something.
Could I?
Go ahead.
On the dig-in line, where it excavate all the material and I presume the line that you've got to get it up out of the floodplain. So you're elevating and filling in this area, and the amount of fill that could be put in this area has already been maxed out by regulation. You can't put any more fill in this area. So seems like you couldn't do that project anyway.
I think you're talking about a very real engineering concern with floodplain, additional material. All this has got to get looked at and would have to be permitted. It is a real concern.
Well, I'm just saying it's the level because of what's been done already. It's maxed out that you can't be doing any more. But it seems that rules that out.
Yeah, this is the beginning of a figuring out process. That's a real thing on the table that needs to get answered with a detailed engineering evaluation. Yes.
When people talk about putting a landfill mountain in there, last time we were told it would have to have a flood wall around it, would have height requirement. When you're talking about hiking up the mountain, you have to somehow get over the flood walls too, like the one that was put around the airport. So any pictures or models should have that.
Part of the model.
Right.
Flood walls. Yeah.
Right. But I'd like to see, this might be wishful thinking, but safe harbors, you guys are getting rid of PFAS. It's not a yes. A 5th panel that would be where you dig and clean and put it back. Like I said, there's some wishful thinking. We've talked about trying to pull out any remaining barrels of chemicals and PFAS, construction stuff, big pieces of metal, whatever can go through some sifter. We don't even know yet till next time what's in the soil. But if it doesn't have PFAS, then you can put it back, or anything else bad. If it does, there's all kinds of new things going on where you can take water. We're doing it at McCollum at a public event at a lake the other day. In public radio, put it in, heat it up, comes out. Don't know about dirt. Get rid of PFAS from dirt. He's nodding yes. Okay. a fifth panel with question marks. So I would like to see up there, because you take it out, you clean it, put it back.
To that point, most of the PFAS technology today is putting it in capital in another landfill or destroying it through incineration. It's not cleaning the soil or the water and putting it back. That is not a feasible option. What Clean Harbors, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, it really is handling it another place to encapsulate it or try to destroy it. There isn't anything coming back.
There is on-site fixation that you can do. This site, I really don't see it being a viable option for because of the water portion. You're gonna be having that water table go up so often that it just, I don't think it would be a really good fit for the geology of the space. In this
So we don't
particular.
even know if there is PFAS in the dirt.
Oh, yes, of course there is.
We know there's PFAS at the site. Our sampling is showing.
But anyway, they're still testing. I thought, right,
Say that again, please.
we're still getting test results. We were told today.
There's still data
from
coming,
the
there'll
soil.
still be data coming in. A lot of that data will be important for
Right.
digging into the feasibility of this, the
The
design
map, the
details,
map.
all of that.
The math with the numbers that I looked at, it was all 20 feet down water.
Right, we are moving into the ending part, which will be very short. So next meeting is August 21st, 9 to noon. And we'll be in touch with you all before then. Thanks for being here today. We are adjourned.
You.